Good evening, everybody. The title of tonight's talk is I Spy with My Little Eye. I think we all played the game when we were kids. The eye is a very deceptive thing. They say seeing is believing, but the eye is easily deceived. Not even nowadays when we have things called deep fakes, where digital technology allows you to fool the eye. The eye, by definition, is an extension of the brain, one of the closest organs to the brain, connected directly to the brain. And the eye really just performs the service of transmitting information to the brain, but how the brain construes that, interprets that, is very much subjective. I want to talk about the sin of the spies. As we know in this week's Parsha, the spies came back from spying out Eretz Israel, and they spoke negatively. It says they spoke Lashon Hara about the land of Israel. Now, a couple of questions comes first to mind. If you look through the Sefer Chofetz Chaim, which is really a modern-day compendium of the laws, the prohibitions of Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara literally means evil speech. Lashon Hara, if you look through the Chofetz Chaim, you won't find any, to the best of my knowledge, Isur to speak evil about stones and wood and soil. How do you speak Lashon Hara about a land? Where do you see there's an Issa to do that? Now, of course, it's possible to speak Lashon Hara about wood, and let's say if somebody's a furniture manufacturer, and you say he uses inferior wood, so you're speaking Lashon Hara about the person. But how do you speak Lashon Hara about a land? Another question I'd like to deal with is, why does the Torah categorize the sin of the spies as Lashon Hara? Isn't it more correctly understood to be Motzi Shem Ra? Motzi Shem Ra, well, we'll give a little bit of background here. The Rambam identifies three kinds of what we would call under the general category of Lashon Hara. Rechilus, Lashon Hara, and Motzi Shem Ra. Rechilus is, of the three, the least severe. Rechilus means somebody who carries like a rochel. A rochel is a traveling salesman. And somebody who speaks rechilus is a gossiper. The gossip could be not negative, and it's not said with evil intent. Nevertheless, it's a nissa. Gossip mongering. The second level is Lashon Hara. Lashon Hara is where somebody speaks to the detriment, to the negatively about somebody, says something that they did which would be understood negatively in other people's eyes. It's an issa, or may cause them in some way some damage. And it's true. And one of the things that always surprises people when they learn the laws of Lashon Hara for the first time is that, yes, it's true, but that doesn't mean you can speak it. There are very, very strict parameters as to when and where you can speak Lashon Hara and how you speak it. Clearly, if somebody comes to you and says he's about to open a business with a guy that you know has just spent 10 years in Sing Sing, or a well-known confidence trickster, you have to alert him to the fact. But exactly how you alert him, how much you're allowed to say, what you're allowed to say, what is the subject of close halachic parameters. But the point is that it's true. It is true. But not everything that's true can be said. Especially if it's said, as Lashon Hara is, with the intention to damage. It's really the difference between Rechilus and Lashon Hara. The worst level of Lashon Hara, which is called Motzi Shem Ra, is where the intention is to damage and the information is false. think they once said that, I forget, was some newspaper baron once wrote on the masthead of his newspaper, all the news that's fit to print. I think you find very little news which is fit to print, actually. Most news which is fit to print would be something like Mr. Cohen got up this morning and he had a very nice breakfast and he said good morning to his wife, and he went to the office and he wrote a check for $50,000 to DOCA. Not the sort of thing that people are particularly interested in reading in newspapers. Unfortunately, newspapers, by and large, make... I have to be careful what I say. I don't want to speak Lashon Hara. But there was the masthead of one newspaper I said all the news that's fit to print. Somebody once made a crack about it and just wrote all the news that fits. So my question is, number one, how do you speak Lashon Hara about a country, a land? Number two, why is it categorized as Lashon Hara? Clearly what the Spies said was false, was Motzi Shemra. Why do we speak of it as Lashon Hara? And also there's something that needs to be understood. There's a Mishnah in Erchin, says, the Lashon Hara is worse or keneged the three cardinal sins of shvichas damim, murder, gilui arayas, sexual immorality, and avodah zarah, idol worship. How do we understand that speaking badly, speaking negatively, given that it could lead to very negative things happening to somebody, but how are they shakul? How are they understood to be equal? So that's the questions I like to start with. Yes, I found the makor for that. It's a Gemara in Erchin, and it says, Tana Rabbi Shmuel, Kala Mesape Lashon Hara, Magdil Avoinois, Keneged Shlosh Averos Avodas Kechavim, Gilui Arayis, V'shvichas Damim. And brings psukim to support that. That's Erchin Daf Tes Vav Amud Beis. How do we understand that telling a story which, true, reflects negatively on someone, how can that parallel such terrible, serious crimes? Lashon Hara, shvichas damim, gilui arayis. The Torah says that man was created b'tselem Elokim, in the image of God. Elokim, davke Elokim. And Rav Chaim Volozhin says in the Nefesh HaChaim that man's comparison, b'tselem Elokim, to God, is that man, like Hashem, to a certain degree, has a power to create. Hakol nihiyeh bidvaro, we say it all the time. Shehakol nihiyeh bidvaro, that Hashem brought everything into existence. Shehakol exists through His word. Hashem creates through speech. Of course, speech and connected to Hashem is something we don't really understand, but what comes down into this world as speech is, on the highest levels, some attribute which is the power of creation. Speech creates. It says time after time in the Ma'aser Bereshis, in the book of Bereshis, Vayome Elokim, Vayome Elokim, Vayome Elokim. over and over again. Hashem spoke. He said, Shehakol niyeh bivaro. The word in Hebrew for a thing is, one of the words anyway, is davar. Davar means a thing. Davar is also a word. The connection now is clear, that really things are no more than Hashem speaking. Hashem spoke things into creation. And the Nefesh Chaim also says that the Kodesh Baruch Hu is mechadesh b'chol yom tomid ma'aseh v'reishis, that Hashem is continually recreating the world every split second. So the Devar Hashem is there all the time. Hashem is constantly speaking every split second, into creation. The difference in this case is that when we talk about man being a creator, B'Tselem Elokim, this power of creation, is also given to the power in the mouth of man. As it says, Devarai asher samti b'ficha. Devarai, my words, asher samti b'ficha, which I have placed in your mouth. Just as Hashem creates, the difference is that Hashem can create ex nihilo. Yesh mi'ayin. Man doesn't have that ability, but man can create yesh miyesh. Man has the ability, through his power of speech, to build, to complete, and in point of fact, that's man's job. Man's job, which has been given over, Devarai, my words, asher samti b'ficha, that I've placed in your mouth, the responsibility, the job, the privilege of mankind, is that through the power of speech we can bring this world to its perfection. And Chalila, of course. Ezer asa Elokim, Hashem creates everything positive and negative, equal and opposite. And therefore the power of speech, and this is really maybe the answer to one of our questions, but that's why it corresponds to those three terrible sins, is the power of speech is the power, in a sense, of death. Inappropriate speech creates a churban, destruction in the universe. Where the potential for perfection and shalom existed, the mouth has the power, chas v'chalila, to destroy, to kill on a cosmic level, to destroy. The Ramban explained that everything was created by Hashem ex nihilo, voracious. There was a beginning. Hashem took nothing and he brought forth from nothing something. Ex nihilo. Yesh mi'ayin. The Ramban explains that this process started off first with Hashem bringing in something to existence, something that the Ramban calls hiuli. Hiuli is a kind of unformed matter. Matter without form. Raw material, so to speak, without a definite surah, a definite shape. And from this, on the succeeding days of creation, as we said, through Hashem's Vayomer, that chomer, that raw material, can assume specific surot, specific shapes. And that's the power, as we said, Devar Asher Samti B'Ficha. Man was created to define, to determine, to fashion the tzura, the shape, the final shape of the world. And therefore, as we said, man's dibur, this power of speech, has the power to create worlds, to give the world its shape, its tzura. And just in the same way as when Hashem did, when Hashem said, Yehi Or, that there be light, Yehi, man has the ability to shape the form of reality. On a more precise level, Hashem created the world and said of it, Kitov, it's good. Kitov. When Hashem had finished creation, as it says, Sefer Bereshis in Perek Aleph Lamed Aleph, Vayar Elokim es kol asher asa, v'hinei tov ma'od. Tov ma'od, very good. Tov ma'od, if you take the word ma'od, it has three letters, which are Mem, Aleph, and Daled, and you can rearrange that into the word Adam. The Tov Ma'od of the world is the fact that there is an Adam in the world who can bring the world to Tov Ma'od. That is man. Man's ability, man's job, man's responsibility to take the Tov and to make it into Tov Ma'od. Getting back to Lashon Hara, where do we learn the Issur of Lashon Hara from? It's interesting because it's from Miriam. Sefer Bamidbar, Perek Yud Beis Aleph, V'tabeh Miriam v'Aaron b'Moshe al odes ha'isha hakusis. Miriam spoke Lashon Hara about Moshe. And that is how we learn about the Issa of Lashon Hara. Now, if you think about it, that's a very interesting makor, because clearly there was no malice aforethought in Miriam's speaking about Moshe. Miriam certainly was not in any way trying to denigrate or to... She made a mistake. And also clearly the Moshe was in no way affected by what Miriam said. Moshe, the following posuk says that Moshe was the most humble of all men. So for sure, Moshe wasn't hurt by what Miriam said. And in a sense, her words in that way had no effect. She simply made a mistake and didn't realize Moshe's high level, his unique status. Nevertheless, the Torah presents Miriam's Lashon Hara as the worst kind, and requiring us to remember what happened to her, that she got saras, she was sent out of the camp. So, though her words harm nobody in any way, Miriam abused the power of Dibur, and in that, as we said before, that lies the severity of Lashon Hara. It's not just that you can cause unpleasant results for another human being. Of course, that's very important. It's usurping, distorting the essential power of man, the power of creation, and using it in a way which is destructive. Because man, as we said, has the power to create, and chas v'chalila, the reverse, through the mouth. And we're charged to remember. That's one of, if you look at the end of Shacharis in your Siddur, that's one of the 6 remembrances that we should try and remember every day. What Miriam did. So you see the severity of that. Something else to consider. There are only 2 limbs in the body which are described as either tov or ra, good or evil. Tov is something which reaches its tachlis, and ra, evil, is something which is cut off. It's from ra'ua, weak, unstable, broken. Ra prevents the perfection of something from coming to its proper tachlis. As I said, there are 2 limbs in man's body that are described as tov or ra: the ayin tov, ayin hara, and lashon, the tongue, lashon hara, and lashon tov, dibur tov. When a person views something with an ayin tova, there's a bracha that comes from it. Things reach their potential. Why is it that these 2 limbs, so to speak, these 2 evarim, these 2 senses, are the only 2 that the Torah ascribes these adjectives of good or evil to? The Churban of the Beis HaMikdash was created by the Dibur Ra, of the spies. The sin of the spies, that elemental sin which led the 5 things we fast about on Tisha B'Av, all come from Dibur Ra. And as the Chofetz Chaim says, what destroyed the second Beis HaMikdash was essentially Sinas Chinam, which he characterizes as Lashon Hara. The destruction. The power of the mouth is the power to connect, to lechaber. We talk about a chaver, a friend. Chaver and churban are exactly the same letters. They're the opposite of one another. There's chibur and there's churban. The mouth can do one or it can do the either. If it doesn't connect, it destroys. In the book of Lecha, the book that we read, the book of Lamentations, the book that we read every Tisha B'Av, it's Hashem, this year we won't be reading it. The Gemara says in Sanhedrin Daf Kuf Daled on the base, why is it that Lecha is built on an acrostic of the Aleph base? If you look at the way Lecha is constructed, the first pasuk, the first verse starts with Aleph. The second, by the way, if something not clear, please stop me. Aleph, base, Gimel, through the alphabet. Every verse has a different different letter of the alphabet. Now, only the first chapter, the letters which begin the verses follow the Aleph base, with a single exception, that the Peh precedes the Ayin. The normal sequence of the Aleph base is Samach, Ayin, Peh. In the subsequent chapters in Lecha, it goes Samach, Peh, Ayin. Why is it out of order? So the Gemara answers this question. Sanhedrin, Daf Kuf Daled on the base, Oma Rava, Oma Rabbi Yochanan, Bishvil ma hiktim peh la'ayin. Why is the peh, the letter peh, why does it come before the ayin? It's out of order, it should be the other way around. Says the Gemara, Bishvil meraglim, because of the meraglim, sha'omru befihem ma shalo ro'u be'eineihem. That they spoke with their mouths that they did not see with their eyes. They were maktim peh la'ayin. I spy with my little eye. What does it mean they were maktim peh la'ayin? They put their mouth before their eyes. The correct way of creation is that we are supposed to see what is really there and to express that. The peh is at the service of the ayin. The ayin sees and the peh expresses that. That's man's job. There is only one existence who can be maktim peh la'ayin, and that's HaKadosh Baruch Hu. If you look again, going back to Bereshis, time after time Hashem says, Vayome Elokim, Hashem spoke, Vayar, and he saw it was good. Hashem speaks and he sees. Only Hashem, so to speak, is able to write the script and then see it. Man's job is to see things as they are and express what exists. So to speak, the Meraglim, they went into Eretz Israel and they filmed, so to speak, an imaginary script that was in their heads. They spoke out and they saw what they spoke, and that's now the answer to why it is that it wasn't Motzi Shemra. They actually saw that. Motzi Shemra is to say something which is false. In their mind, this was the truth. They were Magdim Per La'ayin. They created a script, they spoke, and then they saw what they spoke. It's interesting that the 2 months that the spies spent stretched between Tammuz and Av. Each of the 12 tribes are connected with one of the months of the year. According to some ways of calculating this, Tammuz is the month of Reuven, and Av is the month of Shimon. Now, if you think about it, Reuven, the root of the name Reuven is Re'iyah, is to see. And the root of the name Shimon is Shmiya, to hear. Clearly, Dibur only has any relevance in the presence of hearing. Where hearing is possible, Dibur makes sense. So we have these 2 months, really the month of sight and the month of speech, which is the same as the month of hearing. And that is the correct order of the year. Re'iyah, you see. Shimon, you hear, meaning what? You speak. And those are the 2 months that the spies were there in Eretz Israel.
What month was that?
Reuven is Tammuz, and Av is Shimon. Re'iyah and Shmiya.
So they inverted the months.
So they inverted the correct order of creation. They spoke, and then they saw. They created their own, I think of it as like a film script. They wrote this script in their head for whatever reasons, and of course, many of the Forshim describe why it was they did this, that they were coming from a world of, a life of living Anani covered, the Mon, a supernatural existence, into a world which was going to be a world in Eretz Israel of a much more down-to-earth, so to speak, kind of existence. And maybe that made it very difficult for them to see things as they really were. But they, yes?
They spoke to each other, or didn't they get it? Or you mean yes, they spoke to whom?
They spoke when they came back to Moshe Rabbeinu.
But they saw previously.
When they say when they spoke, that means they had a preconceived idea,
prepared speech kind of.
It's that like in that sense in speech that they'd written the script, so to speak, and they filmed the script that was in their heads. They saw what they wanted to see.
Also, a short question.
Sure.
Perhaps you will answer it later, but we also studied in Ohr Somayach that perhaps one of the reasons for them to say Lashon Hara was because they feared for their future lives, especially in Eretz Israel. So does it mean that Lashon Hara sometimes is connected, or a lot of times connected with the idea of fear? We fear, that's why we try to overturn the things in our mouth.
I think that's
It's
true.
emotional.
I think that's true. I mean, I'm not sure it's true in all cases, but maybe we come back to that.
Okay, sure.
Okay. That's a good point. It struck me, and this is just a thought I had of my own, I don't have a source for this, that the month of Tammuz, as we know, each of the months are connected to one of the tribes, and each of the months is connected to the sign of the zodiac. The sign of the zodiac, which is connected to the month of Tammuz, is Cancer, the crab. Now, the crab have very interesting eyes. Crabs have compound eyes, which consist actually of several thousand optical units. Reality is fragmented. from our point of view. So to speak, the crab perceives on its level reality, sight, through thousands of different channels, thousands of individual pictures. You can see it 1,000 different ways. The crab, and also the crab's eyes are on stalks, and they can be lowered back into the sockets of the carapace, of the skull. In other words, the crab has this ability to retract its power of sight, to move itself, so to speak, into a projection room, to take the power of sight and rather making it an organ of reception, it makes it into an organ of projection. In the darkness of the skull of the crab, it's possible to project on its brain whatever it wants. And I was just thinking maybe this is a mashal for what the spies did. They retracted their eyes into their heads, the month of Tammuz, the crab, and in the darkness of their heads, right, they turned off the lights and then they fired up the projector. And they projected their script into the blackness of their skulls, of their imaginations. I'd like to maybe move on to one other idea. Yeah. Let's move on. The mitzvah of tzitzis and the mitzvah of tzitzis is a mitzvah of riyah seeing, or isem oisoi. So clearly, as the power of sight was damaged by what the spies did, that instead of using their eyes to record, they used their eyes, so to speak, as we're trying to suggest, to project. The mitzvah of tzitzis clearly comes as a tikkun for that mistake, I would suggest. Let's think a little bit about the mitzvah of tzitzis. If you look up into the sky on a beautiful summer day and you look into the farthest distance that there is, unimpeded by any kind of cloud, haze, or mist, what is the color that you see? The color of blue. But that blue has a specific name. It's called tcheles. Tchelet. The Gemara says that as we know, the original mitzvah tzitzis was supposed to be with one of the strands should be blue. That blue is called tchelet. Nowadays, we've lost the certain identity of the chilazon, which is some kind of shellfish, or some crustacean from which this special blue color dye was taken from. We don't know exactly what it is. There are some people who say that they've established to their own satisfaction what that is, but most of observant Jews wear tzitzis without this tcheles. I mean, if you wear it, it's certainly not a problem, but we don't do it anymore. But the original mitzvah, for sure, one of the strands had to be blue. And the rest are white. Blue is the end of sight. As we said, if you look as far as the eye can see, the color you see is tcheles. Tcheles represents the end of sight, and white represents the beginning of sight. If you take the three primary colors and you spin them, the color you get is white. It's the beginning of all color. White is the beginning of everything, and blue is the end of everything. From white to blue.
Why not black? Black is supposed to be the rose likeness.
It could be okay, I don't want to go into this now, but maybe
Okay, sorry.
black is the absence of color.
Okay.
Maybe it's the absence of light.
Good point. Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, we could talk about that. That's actually, it says, there's a posik that says that Hashem, what's he called? It says the Osei Choshech. Could be that black is a creation by itself, but okay. But for the sake of what we're saying now, there's a Gemara that says the color of the tcheles. Sorry? It says that. It's a posik which says about. I've got it's gone now.
It's like
In the Siddur, no, but this I'm thinking about. There's a posik.
that says
It'll come back. Anyway, excuse me. So we're talking about the beginning of sight and the end of sight. White is the beginning of sight. Techeles is the end of sight. Now, Techeles, if you were to write it in a slightly different way, you could also write as Tachlis. Tachlis means the end. It also means the purpose. Tachlis, Techeles. The Gemara says in Brachos that the color of the Tcheles is Dome Liyam, is similar to the sea. And the Yam is Dome Larakia. The sea is similar to the heavens, the blue of the heavens, as we've been talking about. And the blue of the heavens is Dome Le Kisei HaKavod. Now the Kisei HaKavod, I'll translate it literally, but of course all these translations into literal English don't really help us very much. The Kisei HaKavod literally is translated as the throne of glory. This is a mystical concept which we're not going to be able to understand, but in the mystical understanding of it, there is a quote-unquote throne upon which quote-unquote Hashem sits, and the color of that Kisei is the color of Tcheles. The limitation of the spies, that they put their mouths in front of their eyes, limited what the eye is supposed to do. The eye is supposed to see beyond. The tzitzis is a four-cornered garment. Why is it four corners? Because the world conceptually is a four-cornered world. True, the world we understand is spherical. But we still speak about north, south, east, and west. The world conceptually is four. So to speak, this world of four corners, colloquial in English, we still talk about the four corners of the world. The world, the four directions, the four cardinal points of the compass are this world. That defines the world. And we have a mitzvah which takes something and it's supposed to take us out of this world. Strings which are attached to this four-cornered garment to lead us beyond. The word tzitzis is connected to the word lahatzitz, which means to peek. Tzitzis are supposed to give you a peek beyond, a little glimpse of what's beyond. The blue of the tcheles, the blue of the tzitzis, that blue strand, is similar to the sea. The sea is something, says in Tehillim, Samti Gvul Liyam. Hashem says, I've placed a border, a limitation on the sea. The sea, left to itself, would swamp the earth many, many times, but Hashem has placed a border on it. The sea represents something which is basically without end. Without end. But as the Pasuk says, Hashem has limited it. Mitzrayim is Meitza Yam. That's another subject. But the Yam, which is Gematria 50, which of course is that which is beyond this world, 7 times 7, Maharal speaks in many places, the 7 days of the week, 7 days of the diatonic scale, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7, 7, 7. If you take something and you want to extrapolate it to its maximum degree, you times it by itself. 7 times 7 is 49. That's the days of the Omer. We don't count the 50th day because the 50 is a number you can't count. Of course, there's a number called 50 you can count. But what 50 represents is beyond. It's to take you beyond. Yam, the sea, the color of the sea is the tcheles. Chazal say that every single wave, so to speak, is the expression of the desire of the sea to once more try and swamp the world. But Hashem holds it back. Samti gvul liyam. So the blue of the tzitzis, which lead out from this four-cornered garment, conceptually the world, is a reflection of the yam, which is something which by nature is without end. And the sea, the blue of the sea, is similar to the blue of the rakia, the tchelis of the sky, which we spoke about in the beginning, is something which is the color of beyond, the color of heaven, the color of tcheles, tachlis, without end. And that color is the reflection of something which is truly without end, which is the Ein Sof. That is what the power of sight is supposed to use it for. The mitzvah of the tzitzis, or isa moisoi, our power of sight is to take our little eyes, I spy with my little eye, and lift it up and up and up, and see what our purpose in the world is. It's very easy on each one of us in our lives to go through our lives and film our own little sitcom, our own little, what do they call it in America? Soap opera. A soap opera in which Hashem's not doing what he ought to do, and I'm not getting the job that I should get, and I'm not living in the house that I should have, and I'm not getting the shidduchim that I should be offered, and I'm not getting the cover that I'm getting, and I don't have the health that I should be having. You have to lift your eyes up above and see Hashem is writing the script. Only Hashem sees and speaks. We have to speak what it is that is there. We have to say Hashem is just. Whatever Hashem does is just. It's to mudstick to use our eyes and to raise our eyes up. Kadosh Baruch Hu should help us to sin of the spies, sin of Re'iyah, as we've talked about a little bit, to use our eyes, the ayin tov and the peh tov, to speak good. And by speaking good, we will see good. The two are connected. When a person trains himself to speak good, to let no ra come out of his mouth, automatically there's a symbiotic relationship that he will see good. Acharei pa'ulas nimshechim halavavos. After the actions is drawn the heart. When a person accustoms himself, trains himself to always speak good, to see the good in things. And I'm sure we all know people who do this. I can think of somebody I'm thinking about now, and you know him, and he's in the yeshiva. I'm not certainly going to say his name, but he's somebody that when you speak to him, he always has something good. He will always see the good side of the story. And you see that this leads to an ayin tov, to see things as good, and the other way around. When you see things as good, you'll speak good thoughts, good speech. Reuven and Shimon, Re'iyah and Shmiya, the 2 months of tragedy, the darkest time of the Jewish month. If we train ourselves in these times, starting with Parshas Bamidbar and coming into the months of Tammuz and Av, the darkest times of the year, if we, each one of us on our own level, trains ourselves to only let positive things come out of our mouth and only see things which see the good. I often think in English, we talk about gratitude and ingratitude. But in Hebrew, the expression is hakarata tov, and kafui tov. Hakarata tov means what? The recognition of good. And ingratitude is kafui tov, literally kafui is to cover over the good. The good is there, but somebody who is ungrateful, he covers over that good. These are two jobs that we have. To makir the tov. The tov is there all the time. The tov is the constant. There's the tov, and to see the tov and to speak the tov. To makir the tov, to recognize it. And to not cover it over. Because for sure, if a person doesn't cover it over, he uncovers it he will see very clearly in front of him. Again, I say, this is work to be done, things to carry on our minds. And Kodesh Baruch Hu should help that in the schus of our ayin tov and our lashon tov, good speech, good thoughts, good sight, that this year, Mitzvah Hashem, the fasts of Tisha B'Av, the fast of Shivas B'Tammuz, will be turned into days of Yom Tov, as Chazal predict for us speedily in our days.